Which young players on the Pacers have actually improved this season and how much? And what does that mean for the long-term outlook of the Pacers? Kyle Taylor is going to join us to break it all down today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Friday. Congrats. You made it to the week, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, a very fun and needed discussion about the Pacers' young talent, a big premise of their season. They're running it back. If their young players get better, the team will be better. Well, let's evaluate that while we have a moment to do so. Who has gotten better and how much of their young guys? Mathurin, Nembhard, Jarus Walker, Ben Shepard, Aaron Nesmith, a little bit of Tyrese Haliburton. We get into all of that today with a new guest and a certainly will be returning guest, Kyle Taylor. If you live in the Pacers Twitter sphere, you've certainly seen his posts or seen me share them. Awesome discussion, lots of stats. We agreed on a lot of stuff, so not a lot of debate, but really fun episode. Hope you guys enjoy it. Let's just get right to it. A good question was posed at Media Day this year and heading into this Pacers season. How exactly is this team going to be better? I asked them that myself at Media Day, and the most common answer from me and others was their young players could get better from last year's team. That is why you run it back. And it makes sense, but you got to follow through on that discussion. And I forgot about it until the new best Pacers Twitter follow in the Everything app replied to Alex Golden and brought it up again. New guest here on Locked On Pacers, here to talk about the young quintet / sixth player. What's a sextet? I forget. It's
Sextet?
Kyle Taylor. Kyle Taylor. Kyle, how are you? Welcome.
What's up, Tony? Thanks for having me on. I'm doing great.
This is exciting. I love having new guests in the sphere, and this will be a fun one because I have not followed through on this conversation at all, right? That was the premise. Premise one, they'll be a little better on defense. That has happened, although it didn't look like it for about a month and a half. Premise two, their young players could or should get better. In fact, my thought was the chance that none of them get better is basically zero. However, you have to bake in that other players could get worse. Regardless, we're going to evaluate. The criteria we set was born in 2000 or later and actually plays in a way that matters. However, we're not going to talk very much about Tyrese Haliburton because, as Kyle pointed out to me, and we're going to talk about for a second, one of the third sneaky ways the Pacers could have got better this year is Tyrese Haliburton being the first 3 months of last year, Tyrese Haliburton for a full season. But that has only happened, I would say, for about a 2-week stretch that just ended a little bit ago. So not going to dive into him a ton today, but would you say that is an accurate description?
Yes. I basically look at this as, there were two paths that the Pacers could go down. One of these young guys has like an absolute breakout, Tyrese being an MVP candidate, absolute breakout. Jarus Walker being he should really start level player, absolute breakout. And the other path was that multiple guys take leaps, not a breakout, but a lot of leaps. Spoiler, I don't think that has happened either. But when we're thinking about Tyrese, I mean, the one thing that I always watch with him, it shows up in the numbers, but you can just see it with your own eyes. He doesn't get into the paint as often as he used to. And this is the thing that for me just keeps me from really buying into, his ceiling that he hit last year before the in-season tournament or that he's been at recently. That level we've seen is his true level and he will be there for sure. Lock it in. Because he's not getting to the rim as often as he used to, he'll get like a couple steps below the 3-point line and then throw it back over his head to Myles or make other good passes. He does good things, but getting all the way into the paint, he's just not doing it as often as he did even in the 22-23 season. And I think that keeps the Pacers and him really from being the kind of 3-level threat that would be in genuine contention for, MVP votes.
Yeah, if he did that for a full season, we talk about this whole team differently, right? I think even a lot of other guys would look better in their path forward. And yeah, he's had moments of it coming out of the All-Star break this year. It was like, oh boy, here he comes. Where I over talked about it, but like actually blowing by guys and getting in deep into the paint for his own shots. And he got into the lane a lot against Milwaukee returning from injury, but much to the chagrin of everybody, got off the ball a lot. And I always say I trust him. I think we all should in those moments. But clearly some layups that he can and probably should be taking in those. And that's like the half measure between the best version of him and the median version of him. And this year it's been 25 dreadful games, 25 middle games, and 10 really great ones. Is that 65? Is that 62? How many was that? But about that, would you say?
Yeah, I think what we learned, we knew that Tyrese Haliburton was the Pacers' ceiling, but what we learned this season is that he's also the Pacers' floor.
Yeah. When you have the ball that much, that does stand to reason, right? Like that's part of why when I wrote about his absence last week, I started with like, here is his usage. I don't mean his usage rate because he's not like finished that many plays. Like he's second in touches, he is second in passes. Like that is so much to replace. Even if you want to say just like, oh, change your play style, no problem. You can't just do that. Like that's a huge role for other guys to take. It's not just like, oh, 14 shots, spread them out. It's like half a possession's worth of dribbling and passing that is now funneled to different players with different skills. Like that's fine. The Nuggets have lived like that the whole Jokic era, right? But it is hard to navigate when he hasn't been as consistent as past seasons, especially the stuff that you talked about. Regardless, we're not going to, as we did for 5 minutes, we're not going to get too much into him today because he's let's say more established part of this. We are going to go in draft pick order, as in first pick to 16th pick, of the rest of the born in 2000 or later crew that plays regular minutes. Apologies to Obi Toppin, too old for this discussion. Congrats to Aaron Nesmith, who technically doesn't make this discussion by 2.5 months, but is getting grandfathered in because he was in the 2020 draft. You will be part of this discussion. So we start with Benedict Mathurin. Oh, good. No
hot takes out of the gate, Tony. I'm coming.
And I will pose it to you every time to go first. Where and in how much, if at all, do you think Benedict Mathurin has gotten better this season?
I think Benedict Mathurin has gotten better. I think that's pretty clear. I can certainly list some ways he's gotten better. He's a better, his true shooting is up. He is a better catch and shoot 3-point shooter. He had that spurt where his rebounding looked great. But the problems with Benedict Mathurin's game are the same as they've always been. That catch and hold, the catch and wait, the spacing that's a little bit off, stopping the offense from its flow and letting the defense reset, reload, and get back into position. And one of the stats that I'll give you here, for the first 2 years of his career, he and Tyrese lost the minutes they played together. This year, They're winning them. So look, one of the paths to like the Pacers young guys level up the team is that they complement the stars better. And in this way, he's complementing the stars better. He is, I remember in the Milwaukee game, at the end of the first quarter, TJ throws him a pass at the top of the arc. At the end of the quarter, it's like 27 seconds to go. Instant catch and shoot 3. And I said yes out loud because that is such the kind of shot that he needs to take. He took it and he made it. But there's a switch with him. You can see it on the defensive end, particularly he'll lock in for specific on-ball reps. But off-ball, the switch is not always on. And on the offensive end, he's hovered around a negative assist to turnover ratio his entire career, and he's back near there again quietly. He's not sort of dribbling into nothing and losing the ball as frequently as he used to. But there are 78 guys who've played 25 minutes a game for 40 games and have a usage rate similar to him. So guys who play a fair amount. Out of those 78 guys, he's 76th in assist to turnover ratio, and he was bottom 10 last year too. That's not taking a leap, right? If the metric is, did Benedict Mathurin's game progress? Yes, it has. I definitely think it's progressed. But has he taken a leap? No, the problems remain the same.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say all that because that's the same battle that he will be fighting forever, right? Which is what he's good at and how the Pacers play and smashing those things into what this player can or should or whatever you want to say be. And so like when I think about how he's gotten better, I would say decision-making in some ways, but it hasn't led to like the stats, right? And you mentioned his true shooting being a career high. That's mostly on his twos, I believe, because he's not, when he drives into a crowded paint 2 years ago, his rookie year, he drew a foul lot. Last year, they changed the rules and he didn't get fouled or get off the ball. This year, he gets off the ball, even if that's not necessarily leading to an assist for him. Like, that's a step up. So, like, the shots he takes are higher quality in the paint to me. That's good. I agree with you that his catch and shoot decision making has gotten faster, but there are still times when, like, he is the highest average seconds per touch guy on the team that's not a point guard, which, like, the point guard does. They literally dribble it across the timeline, right? Like, higher than Siakam in how long his touches are,
Wow.
which in some ways, I guess that makes sense. And there's a lot of games where it's those two guys who are the two best Pacers at breaking down a defense in like a clogged game. You know, they beat the Knicks early in the season on that. I also agree with you that defensively on the ball, some great reps. We're like, yeah, okay, like this is the guy that he claims he can and should be, and he does that sometimes. And off the ball, there's some flustering ones where you can tell that the way players look at him or the reason he gets taken off the floor is because he messed up the reps. So is he better than last year? Yeah, no doubt. To me, he's a better player than last year. Is he getting better at some of the stuff that need him to get better at to be a better fit? Yes. Is his minutes with Haliburton going better? Yes. That is actually the main reason I advocated to keep him in the starting five when they went back to Aaron Nesmith. And yet I agree with you that it's not quite like leap status. So it's good that he's better. It hasn't like been so much better that it's significantly changed their fortunes.
No, I think you made a great point about decision making. I've really liked recently his ability to like get guys on his hip and sort of manipulate out of like pick and roll type situations. He had a great read in the Milwaukee game. He's like he gets around a screen. He's got his defender on his back, and the defense collapses around him as he gets into the paint. Perfect kick out pass to a corner 3-point shooter, and that corner 3-point shooter is TJ McConnell.
Yeah.
And that's just one of those like moments because he made every right decision there. And, you know, you see that's one of those, you see the improvement and it doesn't show up on the stats, but that's the kind of thing that he needs to be. That's an area where he really can improve. And I believe he can too.
Yeah. He had some really nice passes in Atlanta in that game that he played really well in last weekend. That was that long ago already. Cross court, left hand, one-handed to Ben Shepard, 3 didn't fall. And like that stuff outside of that infamous Detroit game where everyone was like, holy cow, Benedict Mathurin just had like the best 6 passes of his career in the same game. Outside of that one game, like that has happened with way more frequency this year. But
the whole problem. The problem is that we remember the specific games. Like when we get to Andrew Nembhard, we're not going to be saying, oh, remember that game where he locked down fill in the blank, because you don't know what name I'm going to say. He's played such a good season defensively that I could name John Morant or Damian Lillard. And there are like with Benedict Mathurin, like we remember when he locked down Giannis one-on-one against the Bucks last year because it stands out. And his defense isn't standing out for that reason consistently, or not consistently enough. And so for me, again, I see the steps, but his game, neither complimentary nor like an individual level, has not yet led to the Pacers as a team entering that inner outer circle level of title contention.
And he acknowledged it at media day last year. And like, I think has had the come to Jesus moment of like, all right, for the first time in my life, I'm not the best player on my team. Like, how does that impact the things I do in a basketball game? What decisions I need to make? How do I help this team win? And like, I do think he's taken steps in that way. And maybe that changes his career arc to like a different season as the year he suddenly it all clicks and is there. But yes, I hate that I keep repeating the same point forever and ever and ever with him, but it's always the conversation to me, which is like, even as he's getting better, the stuff he's getting better at has to fit the way the Pacers play. And Caitlin's the best at pointing this out. Like, the reason he's so good on plays he knows it for him is because he doesn't have to catch and read what's going on. He knows what's going on, right? So he catches and does it right away, right? And that kind of stuff just kind of speaks to what the next step for him is faster decisions, faster decisions, faster decisions. And it's hard when his whole life at Arizona, it's like, hey, give Ben Mathurin the ball. He's going to turn. He's going to size up his defender. He's going to make a move, and he's going to score. It's a totally different beast for him. So, yeah, I think we're in fair lockstep here about what it is this year.
In today's game, you just can't be like a score-only kind of player, and that's who Mathurin was his rookie year. I wouldn't call him quite score-only at this point, but there are no all-stars who fit that mold. There just is not in today's game like that kind of star level player who is so narrowly talented at that one thing. You've got to have multiple skills. I don't really know what the blueprint is here for like the next most obvious thing for him. I mean, I think not being horrendous on defense is where he's clearly improved, but like he needs to continue improving there for this to work.
Yeah, I think it's like setups in the paint because he's so good at getting there, right? But then what happens from there, especially with consistency, I think is where his next step would come. If he can really hit shooters or hit cutters from in the paint, because he gets there better than anybody except for maybe TJ McConnell with consistency, like that would go a really long way for him. And this is a big season, right? Extension eligible this summer. We'll learn a lot in the playoffs, certainly. And the playoff setting kind of suits what he does.
It should.
And ironically, I've said this a million times, the two opponents they had last year, like two that he very much would help against. But we'll see what this postseason looks like and maybe keep having these exact same conversations. I've been trying to say the things I'm saying and think of the last like truly score-only all-star that existed in the NBA, and I'm actually having quite a bit of trouble.
Today's game just doesn't that player type is so fun to watch. They're really great. This like this type of player like wins sixth man of the year. You know, that is who like that's what Jordan Clarkson is doing. They're not all stars. And again, like the conversation we're having is about how the Pacers as a team are entering like inner circle, outer circle title contention. And you know, that's Ben Mathurin being like all-star vote getting level player, you know, no doubt starter. And I don't see it yet. Right. All of this conversation hopefully looks really stupid.
A lot of yet.
Yeah. In 2 months when he's, you know, still playing in the Eastern Conference Finals.
All right, I got my answer. The last one, 2021 Bradley Beal, 31 points a game. Not a lot of else on the old skill set there.
All right, one. You got me for one.
This half decade, I could come up with one. Everybody break here to talk about two great groups of people. First up, TurboTax. This message is from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress. You can focus on your day. An expert who will find your every deduction possible, file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get back the most money guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only available in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Let's talk about Monarch Money too. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That is where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. It's not just a budgeting app. It's much more. Complete financial command center. You can track your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you just hop right in and manage your money. Start building wealth. Many people start using Monarch and realize just how much they're spending on something like food delivery. Now they're smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, even plan long-term goals, and managing money with your partner smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKDOWNNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off the first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKDOWNNBA for half off your first year. All right. 8th pick. That's later than 6th. Jarus Walker. Do you think he's gotten better? And if so, in what ways?
Oof. This one's tough. I do think he's gotten better, but the challenge for me is that at the beginning of the season, Rick Carlisle, and the front office went public with their sort of what Jarus Walker needs to do laundry list: play to exhaustion, rebound, be physical. And I remember in summer league seeing him not get back on defense at all, having just heard the people making decisions about his future on and off the court tell him that's what he needs to do. Rick praised him specifically for playing to exhaustion after the Celtics game in December. That's 2 months after the season started, more than 2 months after the season started. And he'd been playing quite a lot because of all the injuries to that point. The point here is that I am high on Jarus Walker's ceiling, but in no player that we're talking about today is the gap wider between that player in theory and that player in reality.
Also agree.
And we are in a win now situation whether we should be or not is a separate conversation. But we are in a sort of the Pacers want to win right now moment, and Jarus Walker is not doing enough to show the Pacers team and coaching staff that he is an absolute must be in the rotation level player. And that sucks. I wish that wasn't true. His defense is the thing that frustrates me the most, I think. He turns it over on offense, and I'm like, yeah, it's a young player. The game just clearly hasn't slowed down for him yet. And he is always defending with his hands instead of the rest of his body or his chest or his legs or his hips. When he's about to get beat, he'll like reach in because he's just trying to like catch back up. That's the sort of thing where like the vision of his physicality as like a wing stopping defender just isn't quite coming together. I mean, sell me on this.
Well,
unless you see it the same way, I suppose.
Well, very similarly, right? And I make the same point a lot because it happens at G League level, at NBA level, whatever, that the slow the game down line's perfect because he makes a lot of good reads where he says, I see open player. That's a hard pass, but I see it. There it is. Here we go. I'm going to make the pass. It does not get to said player for whatever reason. It's inaccurate. It's too low, too slow, whatever. And so his turnover rate's higher this year, like kind of a decent amount higher. But a lot of them, I'm like, okay, that was a good read. You just did it wrong, right? And when Caitlin and I did his season review on this podcast last year, my clip section was all about those kind of moments in transition where he would have a read or see a play and then throw a lazy pass. And I'm like, okay, that's good, but not quite there. But it's still happening this year. And defensively, I agree with you. Like they challenge him to do all these things. And sometimes I feel like it's better. And sometimes I'm like, oh, he just one dribble happened. Then he reached with his left hand around the guy's body and got beat and they scored. Kobe White got him real bad in Chicago, right? Like that was a game where he was playing a lot of minutes recently. Got beat real bad by Kobe White. And like that's a player that if all the people that say he needs to play more to get better at these things, like it didn't happen right there. They needed it to happen. It didn't happen. And so I watched him at Houston. I thought he was the guy they should pick, right? I see the defensive vision. I believe in it. The size is there, but the size has not quite matched the physical play defensively that they've needed. So I keep making the point that I think his offense is ahead of his defense. He's improved drastically as a shooter since they picked him. The percentages aren't like crazy good, but the fact that they're even credibly solid is way above where it was when he entered the league. His shot was like goofy and slow. Like he can shoot it. He can handle a little bit. He makes nice quick reads, right? I see how, same with Mathurin, right? I see lots of ways you could just run through several advanced stats. We're like, yeah, he's better at this thing a little bit. He's better at that thing a little bit. The big thing, I think you're right, is eventually the game will slow down and I think he'll be much better, but it hasn't quite happened yet for him. And it requires playing for that to happen, but you nailed it. They are in win now mode and have made it clear with several decisions in the past month or month and a half that they will choose win now decisions instead of play Jarus Walker decisions at times, whether that's empty the bench without him in Chicago or go to Ray J. Dennis over him or start him and then barely play him in Atlanta. And like all those made sense in the moment, but it just stacks up to like what they think of their decisions and what they want to do.
Yeah, I think the Pacers have a lot of trade-offs that I frankly come down on the other side of the team on.
Ooh.
I was lower on the team coming into the season than I think the coaches in front office were. I was a little bit, I would like the run to the conference finals wasn't a fluke, but I didn't view the team as an inner or sort of like outer circle title contender. I still don't view them that way. And I would view them that way if they, the things that we've talked about forever, a wing-sized wing. And I personally would have been a bit more open to let Jarus play his game, even if it means we're losing those minutes a lot of the time, because it means that in a year or two, there is a greater chance things work out differently. I fully recognize that means taking a player in Obi Toppin who's better than him off the floor, and that's not a decision that that's not a position I take lightly. I think Obi has fit the team extremely well. I love watching him play. Almost no player electrifies the crowd the way he does. He's awesome. The Pacers' ceiling relies on one of these guys having that, leap or breakout. And I mean, I want to believe it's Jarus, and I wish we would have seen a level of consistent run that didn't rely on hope somebody else is injured. And that's the way they've treated his minutes this season.
Yeah, and I said that before the year that I thought he'd play more because he's guy 11 and like very easily there's lots of positions he could play that would get him on the floor, and that happened for 40 whatever it was 7 games to start.
But this messes
46?
with people. Like when you're coming into every game and it's like, oh well, who's on the injury report? That's not what you want your teammates thinking about.
Well, but since then the opposite has happened where they've been healthier, and even when they haven't been at full strength, they have not turned it back to him several times. Yeah.
And you can I can point at the like on-off shifts, and they're a disaster. The team is way, way better with him off the floor than with him on the floor. And you can easily make some argument, oh, the team's trying to win now. And if you're losing the minutes, he's playing by, 10, 12 points, no brainer, he shouldn't be playing. Again, this is like a, what's your time horizon? Are you thinking about this year? Are you thinking about next year? Are you thinking about the entirety, of the length of Tyrese Haliburton's contract? I think you make different decisions depending on what you're focused on.
Well said. Yes. And again, the same thing I've said with Jarus all year. I feel like I'm repeating myself this whole podcast. It's so rare for a team to go from picking in lottery to conference finals, right? Like that it's just very rare to be in that reality as a team and as a roster. And that's why they have some unique, let's say unique circumstances. Last year, Anthony Black barely played. The Magic almost won around. This year he's playing a little more because they've been really hurt, but like, it's very rare that is how things go. One more break, guys. Let's quickly talk about FanDuel. March Madness is here. The Hoosiers and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before right now. New customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who is cutting down those nets. You can pick your favorites. You got your eye on some underdogs? FanDuel will make it easy to back them with spreads, with game props, with totals, everything. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting that you can bet on. And the FanDuel app is simple to use. When you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. That is, once again, on FanDuel.com. Moving backwards, congrats to 1999 birth Aaron Nesmith for sneaking his way into our conversation today by a few months. 14th overall pick in 2020. Kyle, has Aaron Nesmith gotten better? And if so, how?
It's clearest to me that he's improved over like a 2-year or 3-year time horizon. Yes. How much he's improved year over year, I'm not so sure. I remember, I think it was his end of season press conference. One, I don't remember the specific year. You can tell me, where he talked about wanting to get better off the dribble, and he really has. I mean, I'm really impressed with his.
Are you currently looking at my notes by chance?
No, I'm not looking at your notes. I just remember, a couple years ago, he'd put the ball on the floor and I would like get tense because I didn't know what it was going to bounce off of next, his knee, his shoe, or the ground. He has gotten so much better at that. I trust him to beat closeouts. That's so important for a shooter like him. He takes shots in the flow of the offense. He's so complimentary on the defensive side too. Nembhard can guard guards. Siakam can either guard forwards or roam because Nesmith is in between. And every now and then he'll like fight, against Giannis in the post and front him and keep him from getting the ball. I really like Aaron Nesmith as a player. Has he improved though? No, I wouldn't say he particularly has, but we were already talking about a guy who was doing exactly what he needed to do. His foul rate, it's still high. It's lower than it used to be, but he leads the team in committing fouls. To me, that's sort of on the periphery. This other stuff about fit and ball handling is where I'm sort of most impressed over the sort of whole period that we're talking about here. But hopefully I didn't steal all your notes.
That was pretty close. You know what's funny is, so I came into this thinking I want to talk about his off the dribble work when he gets run off the line. And I specifically wanted to say, it's looked really, do you agree with me that it's looked good since the All-Star break? That specific skill. So I was like, great, I'll go look at his dribbles per game and it's going to be up since the break and it's going to be better. It's down since the All-Star break. How is it down? So I can't have that. His average dribbles per game is inconsequentially small up from last season, right? So like his role is almost exactly the same. Defend hard, shoot some threes, make them about 40% of the time.
Yeah, I'm trusting my eyes on this one. That feeling I had when
it looks better.
When he used to put the ball on the ground, I was nervous, and I'm not nervous now. I mean, he's drawing fouls, going to the basket, and I trust him to do that. I think that stuff is great. I've liked it a lot. But again, the overall question here is his play raising the team's ceiling? We're on the same
expected to? No.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say that.
Right.
So here's what I would point to, and maybe this is why it feels better, because the results of the play is better. By far, career high at the rim, over 70% for only the second time ever, and first time as a Pacer. First time over 50% in the paint, like on non-layup twos, right? That's probably why it feels so much better. It's because when he's run out the line, it's like, oh, he's actually scoring, or like more often than in the past, because a lot of the rest of his game or numbers or whatever you want to point to, it's like, oh, that's shockingly similar from last season or the year before. And that's fine. Over 60% true shooting, good defender, like that. That's a fine player, but there's not a lot of, oh, this guy's going to make them way better by doing this or that. But the finishing improvement
he does have, of all the guys we're talking about, including Tyrese, by the way, of all the guys we're talking about, he does have the best on-off shift in his favor at like +7 per 100.
They've been quite good since he returned to starting 5.
Yep, turns out adding Aaron Nesmith, team got better. Crazy. Good player makes team good. Basketball is very hard.
His best skills are he fits very well next to Tyrese Haliburton and Pascal Siakam, dare I say, right?
Speaking of players who fit very well.
Yeah.
Ben Shepard?
Yes, Ben Shepard is next on the list. Not a lot of glamour to the Aaron Nesmith or Ben Shepard conversations, ironically. Kyle, I think we're about to say about the exact same thesis we have for the first 3 players. Do you think Ben Shepard's gotten better? And if so, how?
Yes, I again think he's gotten better. Okay, so here is my wish for Ben Shepard. Ben Shepard maintains advantages the offense has already generated, but neither his threat of shooting or his threat of passing or his threat off the bounce creates additional advantages for the team. And that's really what I would want to see. The most obvious one of those is that his shot becomes so undeniable that teams panic when he's wide open and catches the ball. But I really want to see him sort of always look at the basket. And I don't think we're there yet. In fact, his seconds per touch are down this year. And by the way, of all the guards in the entire NBA, he gets off the ball faster than any of them, which it looks like, right? He catches the ball and he immediately.
I don't want it. I don't want it.
He's immediately looking to make the next pass. And that's great because it keeps the entire machine of the offense keeps moving. The defense stays a step behind. That's really important. Fans underrate how important that is, that defenses don't get, they don't catch their breath when Ben Shepard gets the ball. And he's reliable at doing all those things. And that's really good. But I want to see him create advantages. Again, even creating advantages for himself opens up advantages for the rest of the team. On a per 36-minute basis, his catch and shoot attempts are actually down this year.
Stop. That was one of my notes too. No, just his general threes. All of them are down like a whole 3 per 36 this year.
We've talked about this online. His shot looks amazing. I mean,
looks like it's going in every time.
Yeah, Mathurin's too. They have beautiful, beautiful shots. Take them, man. Take those shots. I want to see him running those ghost screen actions that Buddy Hield and Tyrese used to run, and I want to see him running right next to to Tyrese's defender and really making that defender think, do I have to chase Ben Shepard right now? Because Ben is such a threat to catch and just immediately shoot. And he's looking for his offense with that level of intentionality. Until that happens, right? His play is good. His effort is incredible. I think watching him defend sort of one pass away when he knows he's got to lock in right now to prevent his guy from getting the ball is awesome. He's great denying in those situations. His on-ball defense, I'm not saying it's gotten worse, but it's just not at that sort of very high level that I would want it to be if we were talking about him really taking a leap.
Yeah, there are rare lineups where he is their best on-ball defender, and it's very I rewatched Trae Young.
Yeah, I rewatched some of the Detroit game where he and Jarus were guarding Cade a lot. Cade shouldn't be like blowing by you. He can.
He's good at that.
He can like muscle you down, but like I just want a little bit more there.
So why every team would like Ben Shepard is the same reason they always like Ben Shepard. The dude never messes up, right?
Never.
He gets off the ball, very rarely turns it over. 6% of his possessions, above average true shooting, tries really hard every second he's on the floor. Like every coach is like, yeah, you go play, right? I make the joke all the time. I call it the Ben Shepard button. Anytime there's like a tense moment in a game, or like it feels like the script of a Pacers game is switching, it feels like someone on the Pacers slams the Ben Shepard button. Get him in there. It'll stabilize things. That's fine. He's good. But the way he becomes a creator threat beyond like, oh, he can dribble to the basket and pass, is similar to how Doug McDermott was a air quotes creator for the 2020 Pacers, in that defenses were like panicking when Doug McDermott would do anything, right? And so even though he is not touching the ball or passing, that is creating a lane, an opportunity, a something for someone else,
right?
And a lot of times that was Sabonis, but it was really the whole team.
We don't quite have the same dribble handoff partner for Ben Shepard that Doug McDermott had.
Yes. But Buddy Hield got to that level of air quotes creator, doing the stuff you described on this version of the Pacers. And I agree with you that is what the next evolution of higher impact Ben Shepard would be, is mixing in those things, because for him to be that level of, people who aren't watching on YouTube are going to not see me doing this, I'm using air quotes every time I say creator, him being that level of creator.
By the way, I disagree with your use of air quotes. I'm going to stop you on this. I think
people think of when they think of shot creation, if you know what I mean.
We should think about space creation and advantage creation and opportunity creation, and things like screening and shooting do this. So I disagree with the air quotes.
Ooh, I'm saying it, so I agree with what you're saying, right? But I don't think the common fan would call Ben Shepard a shot creator. I'll do it again. But for him to be that guy who can add that much spacing, one, he's got to make more than he is now. 36% is like fine. It doesn't feel like it, but he's made 38% of his threes his last 15 games. It feels like he's slumping right now, right? But it's a volume thing, right? 6 per 36 is not that high of a volume for like a decent shooter, or a guy who most of his shots, or a majority of his shots, are threes, right? That is where I think the shift needs to come for him, is a volume thing. And it's not easy to do that, but like, he should not be taking less threes per 36 than like Myles and Obi, right? It should be higher than those guys. And those guys are good shooters too. But that strikes me as wrong. It should be 7 or 8, but like the trade-off is like, what shot is not happening so that there's more Ben Shepard threes? But the answer might just be that he has possessions where he catches and then flips it too quickly without looking at the rim. And you just nailed that. He wasn't doing that. And I also agree that it hasn't felt like his on-ball defense has been so much better than last year, even though as a low mistakes player, his defense is typically very solid when he's on the floor.
Totally. The thing that I said this about Jarus and his offense being sort of okay with the turnovers and stuff, and praising Aaron Nesmith for his, growth putting the ball on the floor. I want to see more experimentation. And I know that can lead to turnovers and mistakes and missed shots. But, Ben Shepard's like the other side of the coin here for a guy who's so mistake free. I don't want to see him like stagnate and miss out on opportunities to grow either. And obviously games aren't the only time you test yourself, but they are a major way you test yourself. You put yourself up against, real competition who, you can try and either create an advantage against, or who's like prepared to lock you down. And you, through your movement and your, ability to, again, different players are I'm saying should be experimenting in different ways. But with Ben Shepard, I want to see a little bit more creativity and variety that, may lead to more mistakes, but I would hope ultimately leads to a higher level.
Is the thing that makes him so solid, ironically, the thing that's holding him back from being, a better player, being that mistake-free kind of guy? Maybe so.
Well, what's his ceiling, right? What's his ceiling? You watch this mistake-free player play and you're like, okay, but what's the evolution of this play, of this
right,
player
type? And how much does that raise your profile as a team, that specific ceiling, right? That's another hard one to ask. He talked about correctly, I think, before the season, something he felt like he could get better at, being drives when he gets run off the line, study Samir and Nesmith and how he improved in that area. Still 0.7 drives per game for Ben Shepard. Like it doesn't happen that often. Last year was actually 1.2. So I think that is the next thing for him is creativity, a little more pop towards the basket, stuff like that he may not be asked to do a lot, but would add quite a bit to his game. And that takes us to, unfortunately, the guy that I keep saying I'm really high on, and then he goes through one of his worst stretches of the season. It's Andrew Nembhard, who's currently not playing well, but not quite single-handedly yet, very appropriately to say this, changed the fortunes of the Pacers season by returning from injury. Kyle, has Andrew Nembhard gotten better? And if so, how?
Absolutely. Yes, over the last 2 or so months, I know his numbers have been a lot worse, but I'm not throwing that out. I'm going to talk about it. But his defense has significantly leveled up. I think people look back on his defense last year and they're like, oh yeah, Andrew Nembhard, known for his defense. He's become elite for his size and position and for the matchups he's tasked with. And, again, one of the ways, like, I think the team levels up through these, young player taking steps forward paths is that young player is a fit with the stars. And of all the guys we're talking about, the numbers scream that Andrew Nembhard is the best fit with the stars. The Pacers just trounce opponents when Pascal, Tyrese, and Nembhard share the floor. And by the way, when Tyrese and Pascal are on the floor together without Andrew Nembhard, the Pacers are losing those minutes. The gap is huge and the numbers scream it. I can sort of articulate why I think that is. I think his spatial awareness is phenomenal. He knows when to run to the corner and get out of the way so that the first action gets started. And then he has like his pet actions to sort of like run out of the corner and catch, the balls that's coming across for a reset, or ghost for Tyrese to get into the next action. In his ability to sort of keep the wheels of the offense moving, he helps maintain the advantages that other people create. And his defense, I just think, has really been awesome. Do you want to go to the bad stuff, or do you want to sing more praises before we talk about his offense?
Yeah, you actually hit like the harmony of what my pitch about him always is. Like Jake Query just asked me about him on the radio here locally today, because he said he said Andrew Nembhard feels like he does a lot of things like 7 out of 10 good, but very few things below 5 or above 8. And I was like, yeah, that's probably a fair assessment. But regardless of that, I'd put his defense at like a 9 or 10. Regardless of that, the pitch I made in response to that question was, imagine in your head the best shooting guard to put next to Tyrese Haliburton. What is that player? It's someone who can guard opposing guards at a very high level. Check. And in theory, someone who can shoot. And that is where this season we won't get to bad. He's not shooting well at all. 31% from 3 isn't there. But if he could shoot it, that is the fit, right? That is exactly the player you would describe as the right guard to put next to Tyrese Haliburton. And then I said, think about what shooting guards in the NBA typically are. They are not that kind of player hardly ever, right? Usually it's a scorer type position, or they're a good shooter, or they're a defender. There's not a lot of 3 and D2 guards in the NBA. That's not to say like Andrew Nembhard's so unique and so like all this stuff. It's just not like, think about the best shooting guards. You think of Donovan Mitchell, for example, like that kind of archetype. So that's what makes him very valuable to the Pacers, is he's very good at the things that make that work next to Tyrese Haliburton and Pascal Siakam. And that's why the lineups are so good at them out there, and why the starting 5 with Mathurin or with Nesmith actually guards, which is rare for the Pacers, any 5-man lineup. And that's why they win his minutes so much, is because when he's there with another star, the Pacers typically have advantages, even though I think a lot of the reason it feels worse recently is there's this expectation, especially after his Eastern Conference Finals, of like a lot more off the dribble pop than there actually is, and a lot more shot creation and shooting than there actually is. And those are when he leaves everybody, including me and you, I assume, disappointed, is when he's asked to do that stuff and it doesn't happen. So he is a great, and certainly improving to me, complementary player, but not an improving or like way better leader of a lineup with the ball kind of player.
I think what's fascinating is that he's better and like the offense runs faster and more smoothly when Tyrese is simply available in the game that Andrew Nembhard is also playing. But if Tyrese Haliburton is not playing, suddenly the ball is crossing half court at 17. And when there's a second action after the first one gets stopped, no one moves, even though 4 of the 5 players are the same. And Andrew Nembhard theoretically, is not theoretically, in fact, knows all the sets and what to get into. But they just work so much better together than on their own. On the shooting, I think what's concerning to me is the distribution. His rim frequency is down, his long mid-range frequency is up, and he's shooting worse from the long mid-range and better at the rim.
A lot worse at long mid-range. Yeah.
No, he was pretty elite last year, so it was a bit.
That's like his pitch shot to me too. Like he gets to it so easily. I mean, and so to me, it's like, of the players we've talked about, I think he made a leap defensively. I think he became like a third team all NBA defense level player. Doesn't exist, obviously, but that's roughly where I think he's been. The blueprint, though, on offense, I think is very clear. I think he needs 2 of these 3 things to be that sort of near vote getter for an all-star. He needs to eat like this rim pressure, free throw pressure. That's one avenue. His free throw attempts, by the way, way up this year. That's awesome. He needs to be rim pressure free throw guy and maybe learn the dark arts of foul drawing from his Canadian compatriots. Which one?
Hard to say. It's a lot of letters in there. He needs to be a league average. It can be a little below, but like league average catch and shoot 3-point shooter, or that mid-range needs to come back to, closer to 50%. Yeah. I don't care which 2 of the 3. I'm not asking him to be a 3-level scorer who's also a near all NBA defender. I mean, that's like an incredible all-star, all NBA lock, but he needs 2 of those 3 things to keep defenses honest.
Yeah.
Because otherwise Caitlin Cooper has made this excellent observation before. Teams will live with great offensive players who are defensive liabilities in the playoffs, but they won't live with the reverse. And I'm not like concerned, but my antenna are up when it comes to this playoffs. He spaces to the dunker spot, which means that you can't like help off of him. That's ridiculous. That's really important because you should be helping off of him when he doesn't have the ball on offense. Do you share my concerns about him in the playoffs this year, or do you think this is just a bad year shooting and he'll be lights out again like he was last year?
Yeah, his shots down from everywhere, which at some point I'm like, what's the fluke year? Is it this year or last year? Like, we don't know. You're a numbers guy too, right? Like, I want to know more.
Just take averages and cross my fingers. Yeah, I don't know.
So what I see is, for example, the shot, what I just call his pet shot. I think you would too. Like, he gets the elbow, he leans towards the basket, he takes a step back, right? And it's like an 18-footer or something. Like, it looks nice. It goes in sometimes, but not enough. What he's gotten better at is when he takes 2 more dribbles towards the basket, his decel is a lot better, and he can like push off a guy or draw contact there. That's why his free throw rate's up. That shot is a better and more threatening playoff shot, but he can't get to it as often, right? So where's the balance there? And how many of his threes does he create himself a game? Maybe 1. Like, a lot of that's just going to be, do they go in when someone else passes him the ball for open threes? And what's his career percentage? I don't know. I've only looked at season by season. 34.4%. Yeah, that's maybe right for what he is. So that's a good way to put it. 2 of those 3 things, or like, because what we saw against the Celtics in the conference finals was like, they could not, no matter who was on him, keep him away from the rim. Any player could not do it. And that's how he scored 31 and then 29, right? And it was like, who the heck is this guy? Like, this is crazy.
It was amazing.
It was amazing. And he has hit 2 mega threes in his career that like define this clutch gene he has. But it's not all the time. And that's why people talk and think I overrate the guy, because there's some games where it's over and he goes 4 for 11 with 9 points or something like that, And
yeah, I would make
that's the only thing missing from like, this player is incredibly good.
But to me, this is the same criticism of Mathurin in reverse. Mathurin, we like think of those individual moments where he had this lockdown on ball, defensive possession. And with Nembhard, we think of these specific moments where he was this like, incredible, can't stop him, get to the rim, 3-level scoring threat from everywhere. And the problem in both cases with Mathurin's defense and Nembhard's offense is that when we're thinking about the Pacers taking the next level, those things can't be things that we only remember here and there. They've got to be night to night. For what it's worth, I think we all, like people who are following the like ascendance of Nembhard's like god level on-off stats to begin the year, I think those things.
My bad to the fan base for talking about those way too much.
I think, but I think this goes both ways. I think people overrated his impact to begin the year and have underrated it in the meantime, in the period since. And listen, the period since, the Pacers have been like 11 points per possession better with him off the floor. It's very extreme. But so was it. It was also very extreme at the beginning of the year when they were like 15 points better with him on the floor. Neither of those to me is like the capital T truth. You have to watch his game to see his impact. And I think, the numbers were a little bit ahead to begin the year and they're a little bit behind now, but it's like his ability to just, he plugs all these holes on defense where someone gets beat and all of a sudden who's there helping in the gap? It's Nembhard. And he does that on offense too. You just don't see it in the same way.
There was a point it was in January, I can't remember exactly when, where someone in/around, I will say, the NBA was asking me about his on-off numbers, and they're like, is he the third best player on the team? Like, very clearly. Like, that's how insane they were for a stretch, right? Like, He was just smashingly good, and since then it has not quite felt the same.
No, Myles Turner has thoroughly and rightly reclaimed that.
And should, yes. That is the right answer to the question. We've gone way longer than I expected, which is good. And we're kind of in agreement on everything, which is a little concerning to listeners. Sorry, we're not a good debate.
I can find something to disagree with. Give me a few more.
I'll think of something by the time we're done. Okay, well, to conclude this discussion, which is the question of, will the Pacers be better because these players are better? None of them have taken huge steps. A lot of them have taken, a little farther forward, which is how you get better in the NBA, right? How much has that influenced this season's record and your long-term outlook of the team?
Okay, here's the stat I've been saving for you.
Yes.
In the last 10 years, okay, so we've got 10 years of playoffs that we're working with here. 80 teams have won a first-round series. Out of those 80 teams, how many do you think were bottom 10 the first 2 months of the year?
2, 1.
2 is the correct answer.
Very few.
Teams do not start as bad as the Pacers started and win playoff series.
Yeah.
It's not unprecedented, but those two teams, if you're curious, are the Dallas Mavericks the first time they went to the conference finals, and the Lakers when they went to the conference finals the next year. And in case you haven't noticed, Nico Harrison didn't trade Luka to the Pacers, and LeBron is 40 years old and insane. So I'm not saying that they can't win a first round series or that it's impossible, but the numbers and like my eyes say this team's peak was better than last year's peak. My eyes say that. My eyes say that the defense is more connected, that the guys are playing at a higher intensity more consistently when they reach that level. My eyes say that the offense has more variety and should be more resistant to different coverages because in their three best players are threats all over the floor in a way that they were learning to be last year. When at least two of Myles, Pascal, and Tyrese are on the floor, the Pacers are killing opponents this season. They've been absolutely awesome when those guys are playing together. But the degree of inconsistency is not consistent with a playoff winning team. The degree of variability is not the kind of thing that is a typical hallmark of contention. And I think, I'm not like fully out on the Pacers, but I do think it's incumbent on the people who are high on them and say, no, this is a team that could go back to the Eastern Conference Finals. I think it's incumbent on people who are that high on the team to defend why this team will break historical precedent. Tell me why they're different. Tell me why this isn't like most teams who start out the season crummy and then, by the way, don't finish the season. Forget hanging a banner. They finish the season in the first round if they got there at all.
Well, I made the point back then, and look, it's so easy now to be like, well, they were really hurt and Haliburton stunk. And that would be what the upside people would say, right? Tyrese wasn't.
But the best three players were playing.
Well, yes, they were. Like every game. The point I made then, I don't know if you remember, if you listen to this, was like, it's so rare for a team trying to win to be that bad, like record-wise, even with injuries, right? I couldn't think of a single time in my time covering the Pacers that's happened, right? Every time they'd been that winning percentage or worse, they were doing so with some intention or they weren't good, right? And it's for any team in the league, winning 40% or fewer of their games when you're trying to win every night is like, yikes, And since then, they've been the 5th best win percentage in the NBA? I don't check it anymore.
They've been great. But the thing is, like, last year's team also had that peak to end the season last year.
And they never had the drought. They never had the drought.
That's right. That's right. And they blew teams out more often, and they got blown out less than this year's team has been. The only again, my eyes say this team at its peak looks better, and the numbers say that they're better against the best teams than last year's was. But I look at the sum is greater than the parts in this case. The development by each individual player, I do think adds up to more than it would on its own. But it's not enough for me to say that the Pacers are in the tier with, the Knicks, Lakers, Nuggets, sort of knocking on the door of those 3 best teams in the league. The Pacers aren't knocking on that door. And I think it would take a significant and consistent shift for me to believe that that's where they're headed.
Yeah. The tricky part is this, here's a funny way to do the opposite take. They can't play the Charlotte Hornets in the first round. right. The numbers say that they would lose that series. That's why people feel really high on them. They beat good teams often, No,
they do. They do. They're awesome against good teams.
Yeah. And that showed up in the playoffs last year, right? That would be the point, is that as they've recovered, they have routinely, I think because they beat Memphis now, the only team probably in the top 8 of both conferences they won't beat this year is going to be OKC. Oh, they still play OKC, don't they?
Yeah. And they've got another game against LA too.
Yeah, right. So they there's a chance they end the season and beat literally every team in the top 8 of both conferences, right? They just beat Milwaukee. Check that one off. That is a thing, right? The Knicks, the whole argument against the Knicks, you live in New York, they never win those games. They just had a chance against the Lakers and tripped all over themselves at the end and then lost in overtime, right? They are not beating the good teams ever this year, right? That's why people have them oh, they're good, but not quite in that circle. So that would be the pro argument, is when this group with good coaching locks in, finds some consistency, which is not easy, of course, for them to do, they can beat anybody. And that's why, I feel in the first round, regardless of who they play, they can win a first round series. Can they beat the Cavs, the Celtics? Maybe not, but they can beat anybody in the first round, to me, because
still, I would this conversation was about, and I'm taking a bit more of an extreme position than I really hold, but I do think that the Pacers' inconsistency is extremely concerning. But the reason that they would win is because those 3 best guys are carrying them. And I would be very surprised if they were really making, they win the first series in 6 and the next series is tied 2-2. If we're in that position for any reason other than, Haliburton is going crazy and Siakam, looks like an all-star, I will be surprised.
Kyle Taylor, everybody, the GOAT of Twitter and the wet blanket of the Locked On Pacers podcast. There's a chance we're talking in May about they won a series because Myles Turner went 4 for 8 from 3 every game in the first round. That stands to reason, and there hasn't been quite the young pop that would make everybody feel great about their chances, and yet here they are, 1 win away from hosting in the first round. We will see. Kyle, you don't actually podcast or write for anybody, but perhaps my favorite Twitter follow, and it's certainly number 1 joining the Tony East Twitter follow ranks this season. Where can people find you and the things you say?
You can find me at New York Liberty Games and at 1 Kyle Taylor on Twitter.
Oh, we're getting close. W season's coming.
I'm the wet blanket of New York Liberty fans too. We're not going back to back.
Wow. I was going to say probably the favorites this year, but apparently.
Oh, I think they are the favorites, but I don't think they're going back to
back. When I click end recording, we will discuss that. Tomorrow we'll talk Pacers versus, air quotes, appropriate this time, Sixers. Please look at their injury report to understand that joke. It is sad and embarrassing. Adam Silver, please sit courtside for that game. Thank you all for listening. You can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Tony Arias. This podcast is there at Locked On Pacers. See you very soon.